Hey everybody, it is time for HUWTAP number 11 in this playlist, or if you're just watching from our homepage, then you haven't seen the playlist maybe. This is just a playlist called HUWTAP, and that stands for Hold Up, What's That Awesome Piece? And we just have a look at some of the Lego pieces over the years that have kind of stood out from the others or were maybe more important. We kicked off the playlist with the 2x4 brick. So go back and watch some of those. We cover some interesting details and a little bit of history as well if you're into that. But for number 11, I have chosen to look at the Radiator piece. It's a 1x2, 1x4 kind of footprint. And yeah, it has some interesting stuff going on. So let's check it out. I actually have two of these. Well, in dark gray, I have this one loose. I have one in a set that I don't have with me right now. I have this one in light gray, and that's set up here between a couple of pieces on a plate just to kind of get an idea of the dimensions here. So we'll take a look at that in a minute. So our part number for this piece is 30147. That can be found on the bottom here, molded in on the right side. And this lower number is just going to be your mold identifier, so those don't usually mean anything. But yeah, there's our copyright Lego 30147 right there. Should be the same on all of our pieces. Again, just a 6-year mold range is going to keep these pretty consistent. With our really standard plates and bricks, we see the styling change on those year to year, but just 1998 to 2004, these are probably all going to be the same styling, the same kind of font used on that design, and no mold updates either. But the texture on here and some of our features is just an arch piece. It's 2 bricks high, and then it has these little wings here, and these wings are designed to support a stud. And so the whole thing just looks like a car radiator. It's pretty good detail. And then these could be the headlights and maybe even a radiator cap for our stud on top. Our arch matches the typical arch, and yeah, we'll check out all of the system fit in a second. So let's go ahead and look at our Bricklink information really quick here and just check that out. So we've got this vehicle grill 1x2x2 round top with lights is our given name for the piece. Bricklink says that it's been available in 3 known colors, so let's pop that out real quick. Which these are black, dark gray, and light gray. And this dark gray and light gray are the old dark gray and light gray. This is one of the few parts that has shown up majority of the time in a single theme, and that theme was adventurers. So our dark gray radiator has only ever been in adventurers sets, and we can look at all of those right here, all the way back from, I think it spans the whole range of years, 98 to 2004, and every single one of these 16 sets that this dark gray radiator comes in is adventurers. So really interesting how this has been limited to a single theme. If we look at our light gray, we see almost the same story. Out of the 7 sets, there's only one that did not have that adventurers theme on there. And this one is kind of a interesting, different theme here. Vintage and retired, Disney's Mickey Mouse. So 6 of the 7 sets that use the light gray radiator were also adventurers. So out of all 24 sets, that would mean only 2 were not adventurers. And so that's a pretty high percentage of a single theme for a part. And that doesn't happen very often. Maybe really specific part molds like we see in Bionicle is more common, but you'd think that this piece is general enough to kind of be used outside of other themes. And I'm kind of disappointed we only had it until 2004. It seems like it's a pretty cool piece. So yeah, while we're here online, I did want to look at maybe some of the inspiration. And so if we're looking at a car radiator, we want to see, well, maybe what kind of cars this is based on. And so I was thinking early 1900s cars would be a good place to start. And so this car from 1919 has a pretty close match with that curved top. There's actually that radiator cap on there, and then our 2 headlights on either side are a pretty good match. And we get into the 1920s, and we see this kind of style is actually used everywhere. Most of the time, it does have a little bit more of an angle on there, but our vertical radiator grille pattern is somewhat present, and our headlights on either side is pretty much here. on everything except for the concept models. And so here's a pretty good match, again with that curve shape, the two can headlights on either side, and even that radiator cap that our stud could represent here. We get into the 1930s, there's still a few, but we're starting to see a little bit different styling in most of the cars, really longer hoods, and those headlights are moving down towards the fenders a little bit, but 1934 perhaps for this car here, still a pretty good resemblance, especially with our large headlights on either side. By the time we get to the 40s, it's pretty much gone. We actually see a different style radiator that Lego actually made a piece for, and the headlights have moved all the way down to the fenders on the front of the car. So yeah, 1920s is probably going to be the best era to match this piece to actual models if you're trying to build replicas of vehicles, especially late 1910s and early 1920s. I would see this piece as a good match if you're looking to do that. I also ran across this picture of the 1924 car from the Beverly Hillbillies show, and this actually matches really close. I don't know if this was a studio model or how much of this is actually custom, but if you were trying to put something on Lego Ideas for Beverly Hillbillies, I know that Lego doesn't like to revive old molds a lot, but it would be cool to use this piece for such a model. And then before I close out of all of this, I did want to mention one other thing. I think if there was one set that I wanted to see this piece in today, actually coming up later as a gift with purchase, it would be this kind of hot rod redo. And Hugh has written about this in Brickset, but this is the old Technic model that came out, I don't know if he says when, 1995, so a larger scale vehicle. And the gift with purchase this June is this kind of smaller minifigure scale one. And I think this would have been a great opportunity to use our radiator piece in light gray or even possibly in blue on the front here. And just because we have these kind of concave headlight stylized pieces on the original Technic model, I think that would have been a pretty good match and a pretty cool piece to use on this gift with purchase set. So I think there is still a place for it in 2020 if it were still to be made today, but it's not. So I guess if you get this set and you have a light gray one, you could swap it in. I'd be interested to see what that looked like. But in any case, yeah, there's some interesting stuff, especially with that restriction to the Adventures theme. I did mention that this black piece was only in one set, in that Harry Potter Night Bus set, and what that has done is actually driven this pretty high on the secondary market. If you look at used, it's a little more reasonable, a couple dollars, but a couple dollars for a Lego piece is generally a bit expensive. So if you don't need this piece in black, I would recommend trying to use it in light gray or dark gray because they are definitely cheaper. Yeah, 12 cents. Okay, so back to our piece down here. Let's look at a little bit of how this fits into the system actually, and I'll bring this back again. So let's see. Our 1x2 footprint is at the base of the piece, and then these headlights come out almost touching the sides of our 1x4 space. So there is a little bit of a gap here, and the reason for that is they're actually compatible in a different way with the system. If we look at it from above, we notice that there's an exact one stud gap between the front of the piece and the next area, the next stud. So we can use this, whoops, 1x1 with a single stud on the side. We'll plug that in on our headlight because this is a stud size opening. And now when we put that down on our base plate, we see it's a perfect fit into the system. So you do have to bump this up by one plate to use this connection. But other than that, it's a really well designed integration here. A very similar connection that uses a slight offset on the whole thing would be to use our studs not on top technique. We insert this into this direction, so now we're starting to build out, and then we bring it back with a headlight brick. That also brings us back into system. Again, we will need to bump this up by one plate, but we're back on our grid. So pretty cool use of the headlight brick with that half plate thickness offset to use a full length brick in between, plugging that in. And this works for any connection that would match, just the way that the system is built. So let's look at some other geometries here. One thing that you might notice is our grill pattern looks similar to another texture on some Lego pieces, which would be this grooved 1x2. But we're not exactly the same here. There's actually more grooves on the radiator piece. It has 12 bars, and instead of being angled, the bars on the radiator are more of a square sine wave shape. So not quite the same, but an interesting kind of approximation of the same texture can be found in these two Lego pieces. Of course, these are the slightly different grays as well. So what else? We have this curved top. Now, I did mention that this was 2 bricks high. Let's actually look at that again back on our system studs here. It's exactly 2 studs high, and it also fits in across the top because we have on the bottom of our pieces, we have a way for this to slip into that top stud on there. So that inner stud connection point can fit on, and with this branching across the top, we can see it's exactly 2 studs high. So we bring that in with this piece here, this kind of domed 2x2 with the studs on it, and now we see that this also lines up. We're just putting this on another 2x2 brick, so 1 2 1 2, that's a match there, and now we have a line of hollow studs on the top, so kind of continuing that. Of course, if you want something smooth, we can do that as well. We have a 2x4 dome with no studs, and that also works, that matches there. And additionally, there is one other option if you want smooth. We have this assembly here is the same geometry, but we had to make a slight adjustment on our height because these side pieces are 1 plate thicker. So all said and done, this is also a match all the way around. 2 plates and this full height. Is this actually a brick tall? No, it's a brick and a plate. So that all matches up. And then another piece that has this geometry that's a little bit taller is our arched window piece, and that matches. There's a hollow stud on top, just the same. Now if we want this to match up, we have to add 2 plates to the bottom of our radiator, and now this is also in system. So all around, pretty much this entire piece is in system and grid. We can use some direction changing methods to get these headlights back into grid. And of course, if you just want to throw some 1x1 clear studs on here, that will make great headlights as well. You don't have to worry about bringing those back into system. And interestingly enough, these are almost perfectly positioned at the center of a 1 stud height. So if you bring a center line across, that lands pretty close to the center of these studs. And that probably had to do with the placing here. If we didn't have this 1 plate jump, then these headlights would look a lot lower, and that might start to look less like the car radiators of the 1920s that we were looking at. So there you go, guys. Hopefully an interesting look for you at our 30147 vehicle radiator piece. It does have these interesting geometries with the studs not on top method, and you start building sideways, you can get back to the grid pretty easily, although it does have an interesting 1 plate height difference. So don't see that very often, but really useful for making models of vehicles from the early 1900s, especially the 20s and 30s in there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Brick System Brothers.